This Week in Agribusiness. Our special Christmas edition of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Case IH. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this special edition of This Week in Agribusiness. Yeah, once a year, we go into churches to share a portion of our broadcast with you. It's a tradition that we've carried out for many, many years. Orion Samuelson before me and the two of us together have visited many houses of worship in several different states over the years to really pay tribute to the reason for the season, to be sure. And our country churches are so important. They're such a piece of the fiber of these rural communities. There's so much that goes on, has happened here through the years. All right, before you go scrambling for your atlas, when I tell you we're at Brazo, Missouri, I'll help pinpoint it for you. It's north of Cape Girardeau, it's south of St. Louis. We're in Perry County, Missouri, and in 4 counties of Missouri each year for 2 evenings, folks tour the churches. Not just 2 or 3, but 38 churches in this region. And we're starting here in Brazo. We're sitting with Linda Barber at the Brazo Presbyterian Church. How do you do?
Nice to meet you.
Well, thank you for allowing us to come in and visit what is, in its own way, a very unique house of worship here, with great history too, right?
Yes. They used to call it the second oldest church west of the Mississippi. It was actually formed the same year that Old McKendree Chapel in Jackson, Missouri was formed. So they both were formed in 1819.
There's a lot of history here. I noticed you have a cemetery out here, and yes. I would imagine if we were to check the tombstones, there's a lot of history to be seen there.
Very much so, very much so. We have a lot of Civil War veterans buried in the cemetery. There are also many slaves buried in the cemetery. They don't all have tombstones.
When folks came here, where did they come from?
They came mostly from North Carolina. They came here beginning in the 1840s, most of them, and they came here because Missouri was going to be a slave state. So they were having trouble. They decided to move out of the troubled area and come to Missouri. So it caused a lot of internal strife in the church because some members had slaves and others didn't.
And some slaves were in this building for worship services.
Absolutely, sir. The slaves sat upstairs, which is the best seat. You don't have to see the preacher. But the slaves sat upstairs. They had the best seat in the house. And some were allowed to sit on the stairs. The ones who could read and write sat on the stairs. And
there are some markings on the wood that
absolutely
trace back to that era.
Yes, they are. They carved in the wood.
Do the folks who worship here appreciate the history? And how many do worship here?
Oh, we don't have a lot on Sunday, maybe 25, a few more. Some really are into history, and some it's just a place to come to worship.
And there is a worship service at what time?
8:30 every Sunday.
8:30.
Yes.
Now you share a pastor, is that right?
Yes, we do. We have a yoked congregation, so our pastor goes from here to Perryville, Missouri to preach at the Faith Presbyterian Church every Sunday.
We see you're well equipped with music. You have an organ and a piano.
And we're gifted with a wonderful musician who plays the organ and the piano for us every Sunday, Linda Boxdorfer.
And she's here all the time.
Yes, sir.
That's quite a mission, isn't it? Quite a service to a congregation.
Part of our congregation. We've known one another so long that it seems like family. That's what this church represents. We are a church family, not just a congregation.
We're reminded of that often when a church is destroyed, and some with such a lengthy history. I'm a little bit surprised. Have there been any calamities here? When you have a church building this old, usually there has been a fire, there's been a tornado, there's been an earthquake, there has often been a rebuilding that has been necessary.
No earthquakes damaged it that I'm aware of. I do know the Christmas tree caught on fire a couple of times in the early years when they had cedar trees, but they kept buckets of sand to put the fire out. So
they were prepared.
They were prepared.
You remind me that you do have a tree in here every year, a live one. It's an impressive tree that stands there behind me.
The man who picks the trees for us is wonderful, and he brings them to us from up north. We usually have Fraser firs. They don't grow around here. We don't get cold enough temperatures.
That's a tall tree. That's 15 feet or so.
Right at it, yeah.
So there's quite an effort put into preparing for the tour.
Men had to tussle a little to get it up there.
I was looking around at the windows. You, along with the ornaments on this tree, you decorate the windows yourself?
Yes, mostly. I had a little help to do the windows. I just thought it up, and some of the others helped me put it in the window.
Talk about the effort that is put into that.
Well, I start usually deciding what's going to be in the windows in June so that I can make the things that are going to go in the window and have an idea in my head what it's going to look like.
So preparing for the holiday season for you, Linda, here at Brazo Presbyterian Church is an effort over many, many months.
It's an effort of love because this is my church home, so I want it to look as nice as my home does.
How would you describe the congregation here? If someone were to say, okay, just tell me what the folks are like, what professions, what age range?
The jobs around here are few and far between, so most of our congregation are either farmers or they work in the logging woods. East Perry Lumber Company is a large supplier around here, so that's really the only two things there are to get a job. Otherwise, you have to go to Cape or go to Perryville to get a job.
There aren't many businesses here, I noticed.
No.
There is a winery.
There is a winery. That's really the only business here.
There were other businesses at one time.
At one time, the winery was a grocery store and a place where people went to get their supplies. There was a blacksmith shop. There was a post office. So all those things have eventually closed down. And there was a school. The museum was where my husband went to school. It was a two-room schoolhouse.
The church building itself, as I look over it, it has many unique features. The belfry, I believe, is what, 5 or 6 sided, is it not?
It's unusual. It was put on really after the church was built. The women of the church helped put the belfry up and put the bell in so that people could hear the bell far away and know that it was time to come to church.
It still works?
Oh, yes, sir. We ring it every Sunday.
And the stabilizers here above our head.
Yeah, those were put in. This building is all brick, so as they began to build the brick walls, the walls were bowing out. So those stabilizer bars were put in to make sure the wall stayed straight.
So they were put in right from the outset.
Yes, they were.
It was obvious they needed to deal with the challenge.
I'm used to them, but they're in all brick buildings. They're just in the floor in most buildings. So they show real plain in this one. In every wedding photo, there's some stabilizer bars.
This is a unique place of worship. It's neat. It's a neat community. And that's one thing I noticed. There's a lot of pride taken in the homes here and the farmsteads through the area. And it's reflected in this church too, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. That's a big thing with these people. They have a great deal of pride in what they have and how it looks to everybody else. They want it to stay nice.
Linda, thank you for sharing with us the story here at the Brazo Presbyterian Church.
You're
we
more
sure
than
appreciate
welcome.
it.
Thank you.
A long history and a wonderful one, to be sure.
Thank you.
Well, we'll be heading to Altenburg next. You may have to show me on the map, Linda. We'll be headed that direction as this special edition of This Week in Agribusiness continues right after this break. Visiting some of these churches, among the more than 3 dozen in southeast Missouri that open their doors 2 days during the holiday season to welcome in folks during a very special observance, you find a lot of history here. There is a history not just back decades, but indeed centuries. Now we've moved up to the big city. We've moved up to Altenburg, Missouri, where we're visiting now to get the Lutheran side of the story. And Warren Schmidt is here with us, and Gerard Feeler. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. And thank you for the warm welcome into your house of worship here.
Well, thanks for coming.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
I was right about rich history, wasn't I? Fill me in on that a little bit, Warren.
Well, this whole community here in East Perry County began with an immigration from Germany that started in 1838, the fall of 1838, and went to 1839. About 700 people were part of that immigration society that came to America then, and a lot of people are around here, including us too, that have ties back to that immigration.
How did they find their way here? What was the last step, the last leg of that trip?
Well, they first of all, their destination was to get to New Orleans, and it wasn't long after that they chartered steamboats to come up the Mississippi River. They went to St. Louis for a bit, bought some land here in East Perry County, and the rest is history.
Gerard, you do help capture that history too. You oversee the Lutheran Heritage Center.
Yes,
right here.
I'm the archivist and the historian for it.
Tell us about it. What do we find there?
Well, you'll find the story of the people coming from Germany over here to southeast Perry County. And there was, one of the colonies was actually in way north Cape County. But when they got here, they settled 7 colonies and 3 are left. This is Trinity Altenburg, there's Concordia Frona, and Grace Uniontown. So the rest are gone.
And in that museum, I understand you have quite a display of trees, Christmas trees.
Yes, we have like over 50 themed Christmas trees. There's a little bit for everybody in there, from an immigration tree that has all the names of all the people that were in the original immigration, to a fishing tree. There's a farm tree. You'll be interested.
Don't forget the beer and the pretzel tree.
Oh yeah, the beer and the pretzel tree. Yeah, well, yeah.
Warren, you got to keep him straight.
I try. It's not
It's
easy.
hard. Yeah.
Just so you folks know, I've been told this is quite a tag team when the tours come through these 2 evenings here in southeast Missouri. So does that display of trees change much from one year to the next?
Oh yeah, there's a group of people. They're actually talking about next year already.
Planning is already underway.
Planning is underway for next year.
Is it exciting when the folks come through, when the tour time comes around?
I love it because, for one thing, you're in a town, 350 people, and I tell you, Max, what I love when they say, "How did a place like this get into this little town?" And I just sit there, and it is amazing, yeah.
That's the question. They've teed it up for you, and you just take away.
Yeah.
Let's talk a bit about this house of worship itself, if you would here, Warren, and just to share with us some of the attributes.
Well, this church, this sanctuary is the new church, and it was built in 1867, not long after the Civil War. And it was dedicated on Reformation Day, which is kind of important for us Lutherans, in 1867. So not long ago, we celebrated the 150th anniversary of this building already. The stones that make up this church are 29 inches thick, which is pretty incredible. And it was the farmers around here that hauled those stones from a creek bed toward the Mississippi River up some pretty good hills to get them here to where they constructed a church back in the day when they didn't have a whole lot of machine power to do the work.
They wanted to make sure it stayed.
Yeah.
And it has.
And it has.
Have you ever had any calamities here? I mean, I always ask that question for a church this long.
There was 10, 12 years ago, there was an inland hurricane called a Draveco or something. I think you had them in northern Illinois. Derecho. There you go. Thank you. And it blew the steeple off, and the steeple went into the roof, and it smashed some of the big trusses up there. But the church held because there were engineers coming around, and they said they can't believe the steeple isn't on the pews, and it wasn't. And then they voted, the way you see the church now, that was from that restoration time, about 10, 12 years ago. And what was really neat, and there were several younger people along on the committee to redo it all, and they wanted to make sure that the original architecture didn't get changed. You know, the colors got freshened up and all, but it was staying.
The acoustics are very good in this room. You can talk softly. You know, Warren, maybe we should tell Gerard you can talk softly and still be heard. But it is designed well from that standpoint, isn't it?
Yeah, and there was a time when both of us sang in the choir here. And
oh, tell me about that.
Well, the choirs sound so much better in this building, which means that even we sound good.
Whatever.
And the congregation singing is pretty outstanding too. It's a great place to worship, and partly because of the acoustics.
I see the pulpit is elevated here in the sanctuary, and some of that is acoustically arranged, is it not? But well planned.
Right. There's a shell decal over it, a roof that enables the sound to be projected out. so people can hear it. The balcony goes all the way around, and the elevated pulpit enables the pastor to see the people in the balcony and for them to see the pastor when he's up there preaching.
Full eye contact can be made to deliver that message with efficacy.
And they had to keep an eye on him when he sat in the balcony. The pastor had to keep an eye on him.
I slept.
You guys have stories, don't you?
Yeah.
You have some very historic pieces as a part of your worship. Talk about those.
Well, there are 3 items that are in this church that came over on the ships in 1839. One of them is the crucifix on our altar. It was carved in Oberammergau, Germany. Another is the baptismal tray, which was inscribed with the year 1838, so it was most likely crafted in Germany, and they brought it along with them on the trip. And then we also have a chalice, and I'd rather have Gerard tell the story of the chalice because he's the expert on that chalice.
He's putting the pressure on. The chalice was actually given as a wedding present to a Polish prince in 1707.
Seriously?
Yeah, so it was probably made around 1700. And this old Polish countess, because really where these people came from, the Dresden, Germany area, it wasn't that far from Poland. She was in agreement with this immigration to come here, but she was too old to make the trip. So she gave him the chalice, and that came here, and it was used until, they brought 2 chalices along. One is up in St. Louis, used almost every Sunday at Old Trinity in St. Louis, right south of Busch Stadium. And the other one is here.
Well, you guys not only know the history, you share it so well.
Yeah,
and I thank you both for doing that. Gerard Feeler, Warren Schmidt, thank you for taking the time, and we know folks will enjoy year after year coming through as a part of the Christmas tour, church tour here in southeast Missouri. Merry Christmas to you too.
Merry Christmas to you. Thank you for coming to Altenburg.
There's more coming up here on this weekend's edition of This Week in Agribusiness. We have more church visits. Stay here. We're out in the country in southeast Missouri. We're probably 30 miles or so north of Cape Girardeau to visit with the Millers, Gene and Mike Miller, at a very rural church where no congregation worships these days, we understand, but it's so wonderful to visit with you and to get the story of Pleasant Grove Baptist Church. Mike, as a young man, you did worship here.
Yes, sir, I did.
Talk about it. How old were you?
I was about 10 and 11. And I used to walk across the field with my grandmother, and there's a gate down here at the bottom of this hill below the cemetery. We'd open the gate, of course, and come through and walk up and go to the service here. And then after the service, we'd walk back home. And frequently, the preacher, whomever that was very familiar with my grandmother and her cooking. So every opportunity they had, they would come to her house for fried chicken and dumplings, and grandma's pies. Almost every Sunday you would see a preacher, whomever was up here, at her house, enjoying the dinner that she would fix.
Gene, we understand that it was food that really endeared you to the Pleasant Grove Baptist Church as well. Tell us about that.
Absolutely. They used to do a basket dinner the 4th Sunday of every July. And we came down when we were dating, and they would put U-shaped tables out under the trees, and then all the farm ladies would fill it with homemade food, and you just grazed for hours eating, and it was wonderful. And I remember one year we happened to get 5 Sundays in July, and it had always been the 4th Sunday, the last Sunday is what we always went by, and they threw this month in with an extra Sunday, and we missed it. We came down the 5th Sunday for it, and it had been past for a week. So that was disappointing.
I can imagine it was. You decorate this church for the tour every year, and you do it so beautifully with the lanterns and such a wonderful Christmas tree with old-fashioned colored bulbs. My goodness, I love that a lot, being an old-fashioned guy. You must take a lot of pride in this church.
We do. We do. It's a combined effort, certainly, we all take that same pride. There aren't very many of us left remaining to do it, so we want to make sure it's done properly and done right. And as you said, Mr. Armstrong, it has to be old-fashioned and not the twinkling lights. Nothing wrong with those, but it isn't old-fashioned, so we try to use the large bulbs. And as I showed you, we have some ochre that were painted with Santa Claus and those types of ornaments along with regular ornaments. So it's a lot of fun to do this, and it's very rewarding when people come in and say, wow, look at this old church. How nice it is.
Some come from as far away as St. Louis, right, Gene?
Yes,
They make
absolutely.
quite a trip.
Absolutely.
There's a story also with the chairs here, the pews, if you will, in this church. Do these qualify as pews?
I know. Most people that come through the church have never seen the chairs. Everyone has a pew, typically pews in the church. But in 1904, these were supposedly made up in Pennsylvania, and most of them are hickory. And using a steam process, of course, to bend them, they came down the river by paddle boat, and there used to be a landing called Red Rock, just a few miles over this way at the river. And then, of course, the parishioners would go horse and buggy and bring the chairs up here. And some of them are, because the kids would move around, so some of the parishioners took some boards.
Yeah, we can see them, yeah.
And would nail them together so the kids can't scoot around, which is very unusual, as are the chairs themselves.
You said that when you were a young man, you would see sometimes people get up from the chairs and you could see the backs of the chairs on their white shirts.
Yes, sir. No, it wasn't funny, but it was funny. But whatever this material, it's like a paint, very dark. And it was obviously very hot in the church in the summertime, and they would be leaning against them like we are now. And when they would stand up, you would see the stripes off of these chairs on the back of their shirts.
The piano has been here a while too.
Sir, it came in from New York, 1916, and that came by Frisco Railroad. And then, of course, the parishioners picked it up. There used to be a depot in Minfro. There was a great old train depot down there, and goods coming to and from St. Louis would offload there as well.
Gene, somebody has played that piano sometimes during tours.
Yes, they do. We always have at least one person that will get up there and play the piano, and people will sing. They'll do Christmas carols and hymns, and it's in really good shape. It was tuned about 2-3 years ago. We had it tuned, and the woman that tuned it said it was in remarkable shape for being in this church where it's not heated, it's not cooled, it's in the mice, but it still plays quite well.
Am I correct that even the Rural Electric Cooperative cooperates with you in energizing this church for just a few days each year?
They do that every year for a week or whatever time we need, particularly usually it's about a week. Yeah, they're very good. Citizens Electric does a wonderful job.
They deserve a shout out.
Yes,
so
sir.
do you too,
Yes,
for your passion in preserving this wonderful country church. What a great story, and we appreciate you sharing it with us.
Thank you very much for letting us share the story with people.
Gene and Mike, Merry Christmas to the two.
Thank you. Merry Christmas to you too.
Thank you.
Right here from Pleasant Grove Baptist Church, Crosstown, Missouri, as we share with you this Christmas edition, special Christmas edition of This Week in Agribusiness. This Week in Agribusiness. Our special Christmas edition of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Case IH. Welcome back to this weekend's edition of This Week in Agribusiness, our special Christmas visit with you. Merry Christmas to you. We hope it's a wonderful holiday for you and your family. Family coming together is a big part of this holiday season, to be sure, and we feel like it's kind of a family reunion for us sometimes when we get together with folks that we've met through the years. We've been privileged to go to some great destinations across the heartland with our Christmas show and to really capture the feeling of the rural communities we visited and how important the houses of worship are there. And when you get to Southeast Missouri and you get to see that annual Christmas church tour and to visit the churches that participate in it every year, well, there's something very, very special about it. And it's an event that has expanded over the years too, as we've learned by visiting here. We're in a church in Bealey, Missouri, where we're going to be talking with two people very instrumental in this tour. Mary Jane Buckite, whose idea, I guess it was, to start this years ago.
It was. It started at St. Joseph's.
Yeah, and Trish Ersfeld from the Tourism Bureau, the Heritage Tourism Group in Perryville, Missouri. You're responsible for bringing a lot of folks in here, aren't you?
I started with the tour 7 years ago when we started our tourism division.
And the tour had already started prior to that.
Yeah, and they had done a wonderful job of growing it. We were up to, I believe, 22 churches. Started out at 6. And grew.
Then 14.
Yep, and then just kept adding on, got up to 22. And I joined 7 years ago, and now we're up to 38.
And this is our 18th year.
Wow,
Since
38.
It started in 2005.
38 churches. It's a bi-state tour actually now. I think there's one church in Illinois and multiple counties here. Mary Jane, did you have any idea when you started it that it would be of this magnitude?
I had no idea. I think the good Lord in heaven sent his son and wanted this done, and it happened. It's kind of nice. The churches, the different denominations join together, and it's a way of coming together. Jesus wants us all to be one someday anyway, and I think it's working. So
the families,
we're very happy.
I can tell. The families is one thing that comes to mind when I come into these communities, and yours is a large one, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Tell me about it.
My own family, my children.
Yes.
I have 7 children, 16 grandchildren, and 20-something great. Lost count.
And the countdown is on, huh?
2 great.
2 greats. Mm-hmm. You've been blessed abundantly, haven't you?
Been very blessed and very happy. They're all beautiful children, and I love them. Trish, they all love Christmas.
Yes, you grew up here, right?
I did. I grew up here, 5 generations.
Talk about this area in terms of that community family fabric that you see here. It does stand out, doesn't it? Not all communities have that strength of family that this area has.
Well, we're very blessed here because our communities are very strong. They're very welcoming, and they share that feeling with everyone. We always say, especially during the church tour here, that our churches are the heartbeat of our community. Usually they were the first things that were built, and sadly they're usually the last thing that leaves, because when these small communities disappear, the church is usually the last thing that's there.
Some of these structures have such an amazing history, Trish. They go back decades, yes, but even centuries. How have these buildings withstood the test of time?
They're all very remarkable. They're all very unique in their own way. We have, out of our 38 churches that participate, only 3 of them are less than 100 years old. Those are usually due to tornadoes or relocations, but most of all of our churches are 150, 175 years old. We have 3 churches on the tour that the buildings are actually 200 years or more. And those are the buildings, those aren't the congregations. So we have a lot of deep roots here in the Southeast Missouri, whether it's Lutheran, Catholic, Methodist, Baptist, Presbyterian. Yeah, we have a good solid base on our faith here.
I do have to tell you, St. Joseph's will be celebrating their 200th anniversary in 2028, just 6 years away.
They'll be glad you got that in there. Appreciate that for sure. You must hear from people when they come through on the tour.
Oh, yes.
What it means to them. What do they tell you, Mary Jane?
They say, thank you so much for doing this, and they actually have tears in their eyes from other denominations. It's just a wonderful feeling of coming together.
Some travel considerable distance, don't they?
They do. Oh, some people come for the weekend to get a hotel room and just travel all over and enjoy the churches.
You probably hope they come back too, don't you?
I hope so. I'll be there to greet some of them.
And Trish, that's your job to get them back.
It is. And this has been wonderful because we do have people that travel from other states to come in, and we're very blessed on that. And they find a lot of good here, and they want to come back. So we're happy about that.
You do have corporations that locate here, and I know they must really appreciate the work ethic, but this is home to a very vibrant agriculture industry in this region, isn't it?
Yes, we were founded on agriculture, back in 1821, and it is a part of all of our communities here.
You get close to the river, and that has an effect on some of the communities, does it not? That River Hills area that it's, I guess, included in your church tour too.
Yeah.
That's how they came here, from the immigrants up the river and up the Brazos, and settled in Altenburg and Apple Creek, and went on to St. Genevieve, St. Louis, and the very beginning.
And they brought their faith with them, didn't they? And it persists today, their faith.
It does, yes. We hope to pass it on to our future generations, and hope it all works.
What would you say to somebody who's contemplating maybe doing such a tour in their community? Mary Jane, what would you say to them?
Come on down. We're welcoming everybody, all denominations, and come and enjoy.
Trish, it's a good thing to do, isn't it?
It is, and we've had other communities that have replicated our church tour, and it makes us feel good because we know how much we love our communities here, and we know that's all across the Midwest, and our communities are a lot like everyone else's community.
It's only 2 days, every December, only a certain span of hours, right?
Right.
2 to 9.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And some you walk in, they'll be really lit up with lights, and others might be a little dark in there.
It's up to each church on how they decorate and what they do. Each church will have greeters. And a lot of the churches, you walk in and you can tell if they're Scott-Irish Presbyterian or Saxon Lutheran or German Lutheran, German Catholics, or Maryland Catholics. So they try to tell you about the culture. They try to tell you about the history of their immigrations and how their churches began. And it gives them a real sense of pride in their community, and that's why they love it so much.
Trish Hersfeld, thank you for what you do every year and keeping this tour going. Mary Jane Buckheit, thank you for getting that snowball started all those years ago.
Yes, we're very happy with it.
Yep.
Everybody loves it.
We'll keep working on it.
Merry Christmas to you too.
Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas.
We wish you folks Merry Christmas as well. We'll be back here with more on our special Christmas church show on This Week in Agribusiness. Oh my, there is a rich history of these houses of worship on the Christmas Church Tour in Southeast Missouri. And joining us here in one of the most historic is Doris Dace, who is a board member here at Old McHenry Chapel. We're not far out of Jackson, Missouri, correct?
No, actually we are in Jackson now, but years ago we weren't. It was a little haul to get from Jackson to here, or from Fort Jackson even. So.
We came up what appeared to be an isolated road, and I suppose it has been for most of these years.
It has been. And of course, we go back to 1819, so that's pretty good.
This building goes back?
This building goes back to 1819, and they used this site to worship, to have camp meetings even before then. So our group of our congregation is actually older than 1819.
Is there a regular service in this building?
We have a service once a year, kind of a homecoming service, preaching service with a musical group probably and somebody speaking that we think is special. And we have weddings here. We have special groups that come and say we'd like to meet here. We just hosted the state United Women in Faith meeting in September. So it is used.
And what a magnificent place. I mean, we're surrounded by trees here, and you look at the structure of this building, the construction, and you think back to what happened here when they built it and everything that transpired over the years. It's a magnificent trail, isn't it?
It is, and you think about hewing these logs and lifting these logs without our modern machinery, amazing. And this church actually was the little shining gem in the woods because it was so modern. I mean, we look at it now, we don't think it's modern, but it was pretty up there.
What would have been? Have any idea what the maximum attendance would have been at any time during the years? It never was large, of course, because the structure is small.
And I can't answer that. I really can't. I know that they would have camp meetings, they would have a lot of people here. After the church was allowed to run down, and in the 30s, they started to try to save it, and they would have meetings with 1,000 people that came on the grounds. We haven't quite achieved that in the 2020s.
You never know. That could happen yet.
We hope so.
So it drifted into a state of disrepair at one time.
It did, very much. I think there were raccoons and squirrels worshiping here instead of people.
Well, it must be a great source of pride that you've been able to keep it going. I'm looking around at the decorations that people will see during the church tour. You have a hand in that, do you not, Doris?
I do. I'm usually the one who, my mind works all year long, so I'm working on something all year long to do it. Could I tell you about some of them?
Oh, please do.
I particularly want you to notice the cotton tree. We've picked up on that tradition. Ours is, of course, don't tell anybody, but it's artificial. But the story behind the cotton tree is that in Germany and also in the southeastern United States, we discovered through research, they were running out of evergreen trees. And so rather than throw the carcass of the tree away after they had used it at Christmas, they saved it, and the next year they put cotton on it. So this is our nod to a cotton tree. And this year the cotton tree has 1950s ornaments on it.
They are antique.
They are
antique
ornaments. Mm-hmm.
Yes. You must take great pride in preserving the history of what is a Methodist church. Am I correct?
Yes.
Your
yes.
husband is a
My
Methodist
husband's
pastor?
retired Methodist clergy. So yes, of course I take great pride. But I'm new on the board. I have been on the board for 11 years, but there are people here who have been on the board for 40 years or more. And they're the ones we really need to bow down to and say thank you so much for what you've done to preserve this little jewel.
It's been a passion of theirs over a long time, obviously. They realize what they have here. Mr. McKendry, who was he?
He was a Methodist circuit rider. In those days they started out on their horse and going from place to place and preaching, and then he became a bishop, and he was our first Methodist bishop that was actually born in the United States. The others had been born abroad. So that makes him unique to us. And the chapel, he was actually here, and in 1819, they had a session of the Missouri Conference, which is the once-a-year meeting of the church, here, and he didn't attend that, but he was around that time. And we don't know for sure why they named this McKendry Chapel, but it's pretty obvious that it was for Bishop McKendry.
Doris, what do you say to those who maybe don't have the full appreciation for our history that you do and can't quite understand your passion for preserving something like this?
I think we need to know our roots. We need to know where we came from. And if we just get rid of all these things, we've lost such a great heritage. I can't instill that passion in anybody else except by making it available for them and telling them to come see and come feel and come get the spirit of the place.
You really do have to enter the doors here and maybe sit in the pew and contemplate, meditate a minute or two, don't you?
And we're here and we're always open, so you're welcome to come walk the grounds anytime.
So nice to visit with you. Thanks for sharing the story, sharing the passion with us. We've caught the fever with you, I think.
Good. We're honored to have you here.
Merry Christmas to you, Doris.
Merry Christmas to you.
Doris Dace at the old McKendry Chapel, Jackson, Missouri. Being in the southeast Missouri area near Perryville, I couldn't do this broadcast without talking about the American Tractor Museum. While we're in church here, we're not far from that museum. Kenny Buckheit, Arlie Burke-Bigler, that's something near and dear to your heart. Arlie, what are you working on in the museum right now?
Right now I'm working on a little bitty vehicle called the Worthington. It's just a small version of Ford Motor Company, and it's built in order for pulling lawnmowers and stuff out in parks and stuff like that. It's a little runabout is what it is. You know, it's kind of a neat little machine.
Are you having to fabricate parts for it? You do sometimes, I know.
Some we have to. We got a location there at Springfield, Missouri. It's got some of the parts they dealing with it like that, you know. But it's an interesting thing to work on.
Oh, you have a lot of them. Kenny keeps you working on a lot of things. Kenny, I understand you're going to be expanding that magnificent museum.
This coming spring and summer, we're planning to expand to about double the size of our present museum.
I've been told you have plenty of stuff to put in the expansion. Is that right?
Well, Arlie's got it full already, so.
Well, the museum now is full, and I have to tell everybody in there that all 60 machines run in there, 62, but I had to change my story a little bit. We got one in there that will not run because we found out it had a bad motor, but we restored it anyway. And so I told Kenny here, why not? We push everything else around, so we'll just go ahead and get it fixed up, you know. And
so we'll say they all run with an asterisk by it. Almost.
Yes.
Arlie, it's great to see you. Thank you for visiting with us. Kenny, don't go away. I want to get a couple more comments. But you ought to go see that American Tractor Museum. Very much a part of this vibrant area of southeast Missouri. As we've heard each year during our visits to churches in rural America, these houses of worship are just so much a part of the community, and they have strong families supporting them in many instances. As is the case here at Bealey, Missouri, the Buckite family is very much, it could almost be called Buckiteville, I think. Kenny Buckite, Rhonda, it's great to see you both again. Rhonda, this church has meant so much to you, raising your family here, hasn't it?
Sure has.
Talk about that.
Well,
the various events.
The events, we've had baptized them here. They've been married here. Then they brought their kids back, and it's just been a family thing. Yeah.
Kenny, as I was visiting here with Ed and Margie Welker, we were talking about the big tornado. It seems like any church that has survived over decades and decades like this has had tumultuous events along the way. Have there been some here?
Oh yes, we call this our sacristy area right here, and that was taken off in that 1925 tornado. And if you check the outside of the church, the original church was built with sandstone, and this was replaced with limestone. So you can definitely see the area that had to be replaced after the tornado.
You can still see that on this building after all of those years. And that was where the steeple was shoved off the top. That tornado did that as well, did it not?
Yeah, and right a quarter of a mile from here is Apple Creek, and they found the father of the Bleckleys was down in that creek, which he drowned with that debris was thrown on top of him.
The stories, I'm sure, have been told over and over the decades, for sure. Well, Christmas is special here, isn't it?
Yes.
It's well decorated here, and families really enjoy coming in here at different times during the holiday season.
We have a church we're really proud of. Our 8 children were all baptized here. Some of them got married here. I'm the second of 12 children. We were all baptized here. Yeah, we have a lot of fond memories of this parish.
I can imagine. We have talked a little bit in this broadcast about the agriculture of the region. It's alive and well here, isn't it, Kenny?
Yes, yeah, we're very fortunate. I think we live in just a wonderful part of the country because everybody's pretty well down to earth and hardworking. Very
hardworking.
Yeah.
I know right here at Bealey, you have some of your operation for the Buckite stores. There's a Buckite agriculture division, and when I go in one of your stores, I see agriculture's alive and well there. Very much an emphasis for you.
And my dad started here in 1934 with him and his partner. It was called Buckite and Bear at that time. And they were state partners till Mr. Bear come back out of the service, And I guess in the 45, 46, and they kind of split up, and they each took part of the business, and they remained friends until they passed away. They were good, very proud of each other.
You have a lot of great customers too, don't you?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Kitty, Rhonda Buckite, thank you for allowing us to come into your church here, St. Morris.
We're so glad to have you. And Merry Christmas, everybody.
Thank you so much for being with us here this week as we've celebrated the season in a special way, going out into rural Missouri, the southeast part of Missouri, where they have that very successful continuing Country Church Christmas Tour. For you and your families, thank you. We appreciate you joining us every week here on This Week in Agribusiness. We'll look for you next week here. So long, everyone. Have a very Merry Christmas. You've been watching our special Christmas edition of This Week in Agribusiness. It's been brought to you by Case IH.